It started as an innocent road trip. Evan, a 28-year-old photographer, had been feeling burnt out from his work in the city. He decided that a week-long road trip across the desolate highways of rural America would help him clear his head. He packed his car with camping gear, a camera, and snacks, planning to make memories of the abandoned places he had always dreamed of photographing. Evan was no stranger to solo adventures. He had been to ghost towns, desolate highways, and forgotten landmarks before. But this was something different. There was an excitement, a thrill in the air, as if the universe was daring him to come closer to something unknown. On the second night of his journey, as he passed through a stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, he saw the first sign, a weathered wooden board with just one word: Whispering Pines. It wasn't on his map, nor had he ever heard of it, but the road was narrow and it beckoned him like a magnet. It wasn't until he turned off the main road that he started to feel the oddness of it all. The place was eerily quiet, so still that the usual sounds of the open road, engine hum, wind against the car, disappeared entirely. The road was lined with pine trees on either side, so dense that the sunlight barely touched the ground. As the trees towered overhead, a sense of foreboding started creeping over him. His eyes darted around as he tried to spot a good place to stop and take a few pictures. At the end of the winding road, he found a small abandoned cabin, seemingly untouched by time. It was the perfect subject for his camera, and as a photographer, Evan couldn't resist the urge to investigate further. He parked the car, grabbed his equipment, and walked toward the cabin. The wooden door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing an old, dusty interior. Inside, there was nothing. No furniture, no signs of life, just emptiness. As Evan explored the space, something caught his eye. A faded photograph pinned to the wall. It showed a smiling family posing in front of the cabin. The strange thing was, there was something off about their eyes. They didn't just stare, they seemed to follow him, watching his every move. The hairs on his neck stood up, but he quickly dismissed it as a trick of the light. He turned to leave the cabin, but as he did, he noticed something outside the window. A figure standing motionless among the trees. He froze. The figure didn't move, but its presence was unmistakable. It was a man, dressed in a ragged coat, standing in the shadows. Evan quickly grabbed his camera, desperate to get a shot. But before he could take the photo, the figure vanished into the trees. Heart racing, Evan decided it was time to leave. He ran back to his car, threw his gear inside, and slammed the door. But when he turned the ignition, the engine sputtered and died. He tried again. Nothing. His car had never given him trouble before, so this was odd, especially in the middle of nowhere. Frustrated and a little scared, Evan grabbed his phone, but there was no signal. He stepped out of the car and looked around, realizing how dark it had gotten. The once peaceful woods now felt alive, as though the trees themselves were whispering something just beyond his hearing. He tried to force the door open again, but it was stuck. As he tugged at it in panic, he heard a rustling sound in the distance, followed by the faintest echo of a voice. "Evan." He spun around, heart in his throat. His eyes scanned the shadows, but saw nothing. The woods were silent once more. But then, the voice came again, closer this time. "Evan." Something was wrong. He wasn't alone. He needed to get out of there. As he made his way to the back of the car, something cold brushed against his neck. He turned around in a blur of panic, but again, nothing. He breathed a sigh of relief, but that moment of calm only lasted for a second before the distant, echoing voice spoke once more. You should have left." Evan's blood ran cold. There, standing at the edge of the tree line, was the same figure he had seen before, the man from the photograph. But now, there was something even more disturbing about him. His eyes were wide open, unnatural, and fixed directly on Evan. And then, the voice came again, but this time, it wasn't just one whisper. It was a chorus, a cacophony of disembodied voices speaking in unison. "You shouldn't have come. You never should have come." Evan's heart raced as the realization hit him. This wasn't just a haunted place. This was something alive, something that fed on those who came too close. Desperate, Evan rushed back to the car, only to find it surrounded by an unnatural fog. The road he had come down had disappeared into nothingness. The cabin, once just a memory, was now a part of the landscape, its wooden walls twisting and groaning in ways that defied logic. The trees seemed to close in on him, their branches reaching for the car as if to drag him into the forest. The voices now surrounded him, whispering secrets, lies, and warnings. Some called his name. Some begged for help. Some laughed. Evan slammed his foot on the accelerator, but the fog thickened and the car barely moved. In that moment, he understood. The road didn't just lead here, it trapped those who ventured down it. Whispering Pines wasn't a destination. It was a place where time and space unraveled, where people became lost to the voices of the forest. And then, with a sudden jolt, the car lurched forward, speeding down the road with no effort from Evan. His hands gripped the steering wheel as the trees flew past him in a blur. The fog dissipated, and before he knew it, he was back on the main highway. The woods, the cabin, the eerie voices, everything had vanished. He looked around, disoriented. Was it a dream? Had it all been a hallucination? He glanced at his phone, and this time there was a signal. The screen flickered for a moment, but then something strange appeared on the display. A photo of the cabin. The same photograph he had seen earlier, except now the family in the picture was gone. Their eyes, still staring, were hollow, empty. And in the reflection of the window, behind the man from the photograph, stood a new figure, someone who looked exactly like Evan. The car screeched to a halt. Evan threw open the door, running into the night without a destination, his mind unraveling in the dark. The road had taken him, and now it would never let him go. The highway stretched endlessly before them, a ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the horizon. The sun had long set, leaving only the eerie glow of the moon and the distant flickering of headlights from the occasional passing car. Ben, Sarah, and Josh had been on the road for nearly 10 hours, their once exciting road trip now reduced to an exhausting marathon of gas station snacks and eerie roadside attractions. "We should find a place to crash for the night," Sarah murmured, rubbing her tired eyes. "There's got to be a motel somewhere around here." Josh, gripping the wheel, checked the GPS. "There's one about 10 miles ahead, but it looks like it's off the main road. Think it's worth the detour?" Ben, ever the thrill-seeker, grinned from the back seat. "Come on, guys. This is how horror movies start. Let's do it." A little over 15 minutes later, they pulled into the lot of the Hollow Pines Motel. It was a relic from another time. Its neon sign flickered erratically, half the letters dead. The paint peeled from the wooden exterior, and the single-story building looked like it had seen better days, probably decades ago. "Cozy," Sarah muttered as they stepped out of the car. The air was thick and damp, and the distant chirp of crickets was the only sound beyond their own movements. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit, and an old man sat behind the desk, his glasses reflecting the dull yellow light. He didn't greet them, just slid a sign-in sheet forward without a word. Josh hesitated before signing. The old man handed them a single key, room 206. Wait, aren't motel rooms usually on the first floor? Ben whispered as they walked to the hallway. Yeah, let's not question it, Sarah replied, shivering slightly. The room was just as expected. Stale air, outdated decor, and a single lamp barely illuminating the space. But exhaustion won over discomfort, and within minutes, they collapsed onto their beds. The first sign of trouble came at 3:12 a.m. Josh sat up suddenly, his breath caught in his throat. A scraping sound echoed from outside the door. Slow, deliberate. Ben, Sarah, you guys hear that? He whispered. Ben groaned, but sat up. Sarah was already awake, staring at the door. The scraping continued. Then 3 soft knocks. Josh crept toward the peephole. The hallway outside was empty. He exhaled sharply and turned back. No one's there, probably just the wind. But the moment he spoke, the doorknob twisted violently. Sarah screamed as Josh stumbled backward. Ben lunged for his phone, flipping on the flashlight. The doorknob stopped moving, and an eerie silence filled the room. Then, in the dim glow of the flashlight, they noticed something they hadn't before. A single, long scratch ran across the door. Fresh. Screw this, Sarah muttered, grabbing her bag. We're leaving. Now. They threw their belongings together and sprinted for the car. The motel office was dark now, the old man nowhere in sight. As Josh revved the engine, Ben noticed something in the rearview mirror. A figure stood in the window of room 206, their room. It was tall, impossibly thin, its face obscured in shadow. But the worst part, the thing waved at them. Josh floored the gas pedal. They didn't stop until they reached the next town. Checking into a well-lit, bustling chain hotel, they sat in silence, processing what had happened. Ben was the first to break it. You guys noticed that room number was wrong, right? Sarah looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Ben hesitated. That place, it was a one-story motel. There was no second floor. No one slept that night. And when they tried searching for the Hollow Pines Motel in the morning, it didn't exist. But the nightmare wasn't over. Day 2. Exhausted, but unwilling to stop again, they pressed on, keeping to well-populated highways. The road stretched before them, eerily empty despite the time of day. A heavy fog had begun to roll in, clinging to the pavement like fingers reaching for the car. I don't feel right, Sarah said, shifting in her seat. Yeah, Josh agreed. We just need to get as far away as possible. Ben had been quiet, staring out the window. Then he whispered, Guys, look at the GPS. Josh glanced down. The map showed their location, but it also showed something else. Hollow Pines Motel. Not behind them, not miles away, ahead. That's not possible, Josh shouted, slamming on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop, the fog thickening around them. Ben's hands were shaking. Sarah, check the back seat. She turned slowly. The seat was empty. For now. Josh's breathing was ragged as he tried to turn the car around. But the moment he shifted gears, the headlights flickered, and the radio crackled to life. A voice, low and whispering, slid through the speakers. Turn back. Your room is waiting. Ben screamed, slamming his fist against the dashboard. This isn't real. But then the road changed. The familiar sign appeared through the fog. Hollow Pines Motel. The neon sign flickered weakly. The parking lot was full now, the windows glowing, like it had been expecting them. Drive, 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 Sarah shrieked, her voice raw with terror. Josh didn't hesitate. He floored the gas, the tires screeching against the pavement. The fog grew impossibly dense. For a moment, they thought they were free, and then the road ended. The car spun violently as Josh yanked the wheel. They crashed into something unseen, the world turning to chaos. Day 3. Sarah woke first. Her head ached, her vision swimming. The car was gone. Josh and Ben were missing, and she was inside a motel room. Room 206. A knock came at the door. She backed away, her breath catching in her throat. The doorknob turned, and then the door opened. A figure stepped inside, its face familiar, too familiar. It was her, but the eyes were wrong. Hollow, empty. "You shouldn't have left," the other Sarah whispered. "Now it's your turn." And the door slammed shut. Alex and Laura had been dreaming of a road trip for months. They wanted to escape the hustle and bustle of city life, to find something off the beaten path. So, on a bright Saturday morning, they packed their bags, jumped into the rental car, and set out toward the unknown. Their destination was a long stretch of highway, winding through the southern part of the United States. They weren't in a rush, just two friends seeking an adventure. They passed familiar sights: small towns, gas stations, and fast food stops. Everything felt normal. But as the day wore on, the road began to narrow. The green fields of the countryside slowly gave way to thick forests, and the familiar hum of passing cars faded away. Their laughter and casual conversation began to quiet as they ventured deeper into an unfamiliar part of the state. The GPS kept showing a route that was more remote with each passing mile, as if leading them toward something unknown. After a while, the only sign of civilization they saw was an old, dilapidated road sign. It was rusted, with no clear name, but something about it felt eerie. Alex, who was driving, glanced at Laura. She was staring out the window, looking puzzled. "Think we should keep going?" he asked, trying to hide the unease in his voice. Laura looked up, her expression unreadable. "Why not? It's a road trip, right? We're not in any rush." They continued on. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the once clear skies darkened and a dense fog settled around them. The air grew colder, and the road became more uneven, a winding stretch of asphalt that hadn't seen any maintenance in decades. They passed a couple of broken-down shacks, the kind of places you'd see in horror movies, but dismissed them as relics of the past. But something was off. It was too quiet. There were no other cars, no lights, no signs of life. Laura felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up as they drove further into the woods. Then, out of nowhere, the car sputtered and jerked. The engine made a strange noise before cutting out completely. Alex tried to restart it, but nothing happened. "Damn it," Alex muttered, banging his hands against the steering wheel. "Out of gas?" "I don't think so," Laura said. "I checked it this morning. There's plenty of gas." "Great," Alex replied, opening the door and stepping out into the chilly evening air. They were stranded, deep in the woods with no one around for miles. "Let's walk to that house we passed a while ago," Laura suggested. "Maybe they have a phone or can help us out." They grabbed their jackets and started walking toward the house, though it seemed much farther now. As they neared it, the windows seemed oddly dark, the front porch silent and still. No lights, no movement. The door creaked open, and an old woman appeared in the doorway. Her hair was long, gray, and tangled. Her clothes were old-fashioned, but her smile was wide, too wide, as if it had been forced. "Lost, are we?" she asked, in a voice that sounded both kind and unsettling. "Yeah," Alex said, feeling an odd sense of discomfort. "Our car broke down. Could we use your phone?" The woman stared at them for a moment, her smile not fading. Come in," she said, stepping aside to let them in. The inside of the house was dimly lit, with dusty furniture and antique decorations. The air smelled stale, like something had been sealed up for too long. The woman led them into the living room, where an old rotary phone sat on a table. "Make your call," she said, her voice almost a whisper now. Alex grabbed the phone, dialing the rental company's emergency number. But instead of the usual automated message, the line crackled with static. Then a voice came through, distorted and incomprehensible. He pulled the phone away from his ear, confused. What the hell? Laura was staring at the walls. They were covered in strange markings, symbols etched into the wood, most of them too worn to read clearly. She looked around, her heart racing. "Alex," she whispered, "something's not right." The door slammed shut behind them, and the woman's voice, now cold and sharp, rang out. "You shouldn't have come here." They turned to find the old woman standing in the doorway, her expression twisted into something dark. Before they could react, the lights flickered and went out completely. In the pitch-black darkness, they heard whispers, faint and distant, as though voices were coming from all directions. Suddenly, a heavy force slammed into Alex, sending him crashing to the floor. He scrambled to his feet, but something grabbed his ankle, pulling him toward the dark corner of the room. Laura screamed and tried to help, but she was shoved back by an unseen force. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with an oppressive presence. Alex and Laura tried to fight their way out, but no matter how hard they tried, the door wouldn't open. Their surroundings warped and twisted, becoming unrecognizable, and the old woman's laugh echoed in the distance. The last thing Alex saw was the woman's face, her eyes hollow, her mouth opening wide in a scream that sounded far too familiar, like it had been heard before, many times over the years. And then, nothing. Laura was staring at the walls. They were covered in strange markings, symbols etched into the wood, most of them too worn to read clearly. She looked around, her heart racing. "Alex," she whispered, "something's not right." The door slammed shut behind them, and the woman's voice, now cold and sharp, rang out. "You shouldn't have come here." They turned to find the old woman standing in the doorway, her expression twisted into something dark. Before they could react, the lights flickered and went out completely. In the pitch-black darkness, they heard whispers, faint and distant, as though voices were coming from all directions. Suddenly, a heavy force slammed into Alex, sending him crashing to the floor. He scrambled to his feet, but something grabbed his ankle, pulling him toward the dark corner of the room. Laura screamed and tried to help, but she was shoved back by an unseen force. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with an oppressive presence. Alex and Laura tried to fight their way out, but no matter how hard they tried, the door wouldn't open. Their surroundings warped and twisted, becoming unrecognizable, and the old woman's laugh echoed in the distance. The last thing Alex saw was the woman's face, her eyes hollow, her mouth opening wide in a scream that sounded far too familiar, like it had been heard before many times over the years. And then, nothing. The asphalt stretched endlessly before them, cracked and faded under the weight of time. Dylan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, eyes scanning the road as the last traces of sunlight bled away into the horizon. In the back seat, his girlfriend Jess shifted uncomfortably, rubbing her arms as if a sudden chill had crept into the car. Mark and Lila, their closest friends, sat beside her, their usual laughter and chatter replaced with uneasy silence. "This road wasn't on the map," Jess murmured, looking at the GPS on her phone. The blue dot marking their location hovered over a blank, featureless expanse. "Must be a glitch," Dylan muttered, but even he didn't believe it. They had been driving for hours, cutting through the Nevada desert, following a detour after an accident had closed the main highway. The detour sign had been faded, nearly unreadable, but desperation to keep moving had made the choice easy. Now, there was no turning back. The road was too narrow, too winding. Darkness had swallowed everything behind them. Then, the headlights flickered, just for a second, but long enough to make Dylan's pulse quicken. "Did you see that?" Lila whispered. Mark nodded. "Yeah, maybe we should pull over, check the engine." Dylan hesitated. The idea of stopping on this deserted stretch of road didn't sit well with him, but as if responding to their conversation, the car gave a shudder and the engine stuttered. The speedometer needle plummeted to 0. The car rolled to a halt. A beat of silence passed, then another. No one moved. Dylan exhaled sharply. "I'll check it out. Stay inside." He grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out, his boots crunching against loose gravel. The night air was heavy, almost oppressive. Crickets had gone silent. There was no wind, no movement, just an eerie, unnatural stillness. As he popped the hood, the flashlight sputtered. He smacked it, trying to steady the beam. The engine looked fine, no smoke, no leaks, nothing to explain why the car had died. Then, just beyond the glow of the flashlight, he saw it. A sign, rusted, tilting slightly. The words barely legible beneath layers of grime and corrosion. "Welcome to Blackridge." Dylan frowned. Blackridge? Never heard of it. Something shifted in the darkness. A whisper of movement, a scuff of gravel. Dylan swung the flashlight up, the beam slicing through the void, but there was nothing. Just the vast emptiness of the desert. The back door of the car creaked open. Jess stepped out. "Dylan? What is it?" "Just a sign. Some town called Blackridge. Ever heard of it?" Jess shook her head. "Number and it's not on the map. Maybe we should..." A sudden, piercing scream shattered the silence. Lila. Dylan and Jess spun toward the car. The back door was open, Lila and Mark nowhere in sight. "Lila! Mark!" Dylan's voice echoed into the night. No answer. He rushed to the other side of the car, sweeping the flashlight in frantic arcs. The desert stretched out endlessly, empty and lifeless. They were gone. Jess clutched his arm. They were just here. Where the hell did they go? A low hum filled the air, deep and resonant, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. Dylan turned toward the sign again. His breath caught in his throat. The sign had changed. The rusted letters were gone. Instead, fresh, bold text stared back at them. "Welcome to Blackridge. Population 2 inches." Jess choked on a sob. "Dylan?" Then, behind them, the car radio crackled to life. A static-laced voice slithered through the speakers. "Run!" The headlights flared, blindingly bright, casting long, twisting shadows along the road. One of those shadows moved. Dylan grabbed Jess's hand and ran. The town of Blackridge loomed ahead, materializing through the darkness like a mirage. Old, decaying buildings lined the streets, their windows black and hollow. A single street lamp flickered weakly, barely piercing the gloom. Jess gasped for breath, her grip tightening on Dylan's hand. "Where are we?" "I don't know." Footsteps echoed behind them. They weren't alone. Dylan yanked Jess into an alleyway, pressing their backs against the cold, crumbling brick of a long-abandoned store. He peeked around the corner. A figure stood in the center of the street, tall, unnaturally thin. Its limbs too long, fingers twitching like the legs of a dying spider. Its face, there was no face. Just smooth, pale skin stretched tight over a skull-like head. It took a step forward, then another. Dylan's breath hitched. It wasn't walking. It was gliding, effortless, silent, moving like a shadow cast by an unseen light. Jess let out a tiny whimper. The thing's head snapped toward them. Dylan grabbed her wrist and ran. They darted through the narrow alley, emerging into another street identical to the last. More buildings, more silence. The town was a labyrinth of decay, a place lost to time. Then, a sound, faint but distinct. Lila's voice. "Help! Me!" Jess turned toward the sound. "Lila, where are you?" A door stood ajar nearby, swaying slightly in an unseen breeze. The voice came from within. Dylan hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to turn away. But Jess was already moving, yanking the door open. Inside was darkness. "Lila?" Jess whispered, stepping in. The door slammed shut behind them. The room was suffocatingly dark. Dylan fumbled for his flashlight, but when he flicked it on, the beam barely penetrated the inky blackness. Then the walls began to move. Shadows stretched and twisted, figures forming within them. Eyes blinked open, glowing like embers. Whispers slithered through the air, voices overlapping in an incomprehensible cacophony. Jess screamed. Dylan grabbed her, pulling her toward the door. It wouldn't budge. A shadow detached from the wall. The faceless thing stood inches from them, its elongated fingers reaching. Dylan kicked the door, wood splintering under his desperate assault. With one final shove, it burst open, spilling them back onto the street. The town had changed. Buildings were closer now, the streets tighter. The sky above was no longer black, but a deep, pulsating red. And the sign at the town's entrance now read, "Welcome to Blackridge. Population, 2 inches." A realization chilled Dylan to his core. They weren't escaping. They were becoming part of it. Jess clutched his arm, tears streaming down her face. "Dylan, what do we do?" The faceless things were closing in, their whispering voices merging into a single, deafening sound. A welcome. Dylan held Jess tight. Then the world went black. The next morning, the sun rose over the empty highway. The car sat abandoned, doors open, headlights still glowing dimly. A new sign stood beside the road. "Welcome to Blackridge. Population 4 inches." Emily, Sam, and Jake had planned their road trip for months. After the chaos of city life, constant meetings, deadlines, and endless noise, nothing seemed more appealing than getting away, leaving behind the familiar and venturing into the unknown. They wanted to explore the quiet corners of the country, untouched towns with stories to tell and places to see, far away from the hum of urban life. Emily was the one behind the wheel, as usual, and Sam and Jake, her best friends since college, sat in the back seat, chatting and joking about everything and nothing. It was supposed to be a relaxing, carefree weekend. They had chosen the route carefully, with Jake insisting they take the historic Route 66, an iconic stretch of highway that wound its way through the heart of the United States. Jake was a history buff, and the idea of driving down this famous road filled him with nostalgia. To him, it was more than just a highway. It was a piece of American history. Emily, though, was simply looking forward to the change of scenery. Sam was excited as well, but he was a bit quieter than usual, as if something was weighing on his mind. He'd been like that for days, and Emily figured it was just the stress of work catching up to him. The first few hours of the drive were uneventful. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the road as the trio made their way through small towns and stretches of open land. The radio played a mix of rock and country tunes, and the world outside seemed to pass by in a blur of golden fields and fading daylight. Sam dozed off in the back seat, his head resting against the window. Jake, ever the chatterbox, kept up a running commentary about the history of each town they passed. Emily drove on, her mind wandering as she watched the miles tick by. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, something changed. The road ahead seemed to stretch out forever, the headlights illuminating only a narrow strip of asphalt in front of them. The familiar landmarks disappeared, replaced by a dark, foreboding landscape. Emily glanced at the GPS on her phone. They were still on Route 66, but the map seemed wrong. There were no signs for the next town, and the road ahead felt off, unnatural. The car hummed along, but the air inside the vehicle grew tense. Sam shifted uncomfortably in the back seat, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something's not right." Emily turned her head, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," Sam said, his voice strained. "It's like we're not supposed to be here." Jake glanced out the window, his eyes narrowing. "It's just dark, man. Relax." But Sam didn't look relaxed. His eyes were wide, darting around nervously as if he were searching for something just beyond the edges of the road. Emily felt a chill creep up her spine, though she couldn't explain why. It was just an empty highway, nothing to worry about. But the stillness of the night seemed to press in on them, suffocating and oppressive. Minutes passed in silence as Emily kept driving, but the road didn't seem to end. Towns should have been approaching by now, but there was nothing. No lights, no cars, no signs of life. Just the endless stretch of road, flanked by dense trees and nothing else. "We've been on this road for way too long," Jake said, frowning. "We should have reached a town by now." Emily checked the GPS again. "It says we're still on Route 66, but there's nothing up ahead. No towns, no exits, just miles of nothing." Sam's voice came from the back seat, barely a whisper. "I told you we weren't supposed to be here." The words hung in the air, unsettling and heavy. Emily shook her head, trying to focus. "You're imagining things. It's just an isolated stretch of highway. We'll reach a town soon." But Sam wasn't convinced. He sat up straighter, his hands gripping the seat in front of him. "I don't think we're alone." Emily shot him a confused look, but before she could respond, the car jolted, sending a wave of panic through her. The engine sputtered, and the lights flickered for a moment before going out completely. The car coasted to a slow stop in the middle of the road, the sudden stillness more terrifying than anything else. For a moment, no one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the world had paused around them. Emily turned the key, but the engine didn't respond. She tried again. Nothing. Come on," she muttered, frustration rising in her chest. Sam opened his door and stepped out into the night, looking around. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine. The road ahead seemed endless, the trees stretching out like dark sentinels on either side. There was no sign of anything, no houses, no lights, no people, just an empty highway. "We're not alone," Sam repeated, his voice trembling slightly. "Stop freaking out," Jake snapped. "We'll figure it out. Maybe there's a mechanic around here somewhere." But even as he spoke, Emily could feel the unease growing. The air had a strange stillness to it, and the night felt far too quiet. She got out of the car, her feet crunching against the gravel as she made her way to the hood. It was dark, and the headlights barely illuminated anything. The engine was dead, and she had no idea what could have caused it. There were no signs of anything unusual, no signs of a breakdown, but something felt wrong. "Do you hear that?" Sam asked, his voice tense. Emily looked at him, puzzled. "What are you talking about?" Sam's eyes darted around. "Voices. I hear voices." Emily's stomach dropped. She couldn't hear anything, just the low hum of the dead engine and the rustling of leaves in the wind. But Sam was looking around, his expression terrified. "You don't hear that?" he asked again, almost pleading. "It's like someone's talking to us." Jake, now standing beside Emily, squinted into the darkness. "You're hearing things, man. There's nothing out there." But the moment he spoke, Emily thought she heard it too. A faint, distant whisper, too low to make out the words. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, though still impossible to understand. They seemed to be coming from the trees, from the shadows themselves. It was as if something or someone was trying to communicate with them. "I told you," Sam whispered. "We shouldn't be here." Suddenly, the headlights flickered back on, blinding them for a moment. Emily jumped, and when the lights stabilized, they were no longer alone. A figure stood at the edge of the road, watching them. It was an old man, bent and frail, with eyes that gleamed unnaturally bright in the darkness. His face was pale and gaunt, his clothes tattered, and he stood motionless, staring at them as if waiting for something. Emily froze, unsure what to do. She opened her mouth to speak, but the man didn't move. "Get in the car," the old man said, his voice raspy and low. "You need to leave." Emily took a step back, her mind racing. "What? Who are you?" "You're on the wrong road," the old man said. "The road you're on doesn't lead anywhere. It leads to nowhere. You're lost." "Lost?" Jake said, his voice shaky. "What do you mean?" "We just need to get to the next town. We'll be fine." The old man's eyes glinted with something dark, something terrifying. "This road doesn't go to any town. It doesn't lead to anywhere. It only leads to the road itself." Emily felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "What are you talking about?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he pointed down the road. "Get in the car. You need to leave, now." Without thinking, Emily rushed back to the car, her heart pounding. She tried to start the engine, but the car wouldn't respond. The whispers had returned, louder now, echoing around them. The air was thick, oppressive, and the shadows in the trees seemed to shift, moving toward them like dark shapes in the night. "We're trapped," Sam said, his voice shaking. Jake tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. They were locked inside, but no one had locked the doors. The old man's voice came again, this time louder, more urgent. "You're not supposed to be here. The road, it never ends. It takes you, and you never leave." The car lurched forward suddenly, jerking them all into their seats. The engine roared to life, but it wasn't Emily who was driving. The car was moving on its own, pulling them down the darkened road. They were no longer in control. The world around them twisted, the road stretching out like a tunnel. The trees seemed to blur, and the air felt heavy with something unseen, something ancient. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, and Emily could no longer tell if they were coming from the car, the trees, or something else entirely. Her heart raced as the road twisted and turned, pulling them deeper and deeper into the unknown. Sam clutched the seat, his eyes wide with fear. "This is it. were never going to get out, and as the road stretched on endlessly with no end in sight, Emily realized that Sam was right. They were trapped. The road had claimed them, just as it had claimed others before them. There would be no escape. There was only the road, and it would never let them go. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications, because more stories are coming. See you in the dark.